Data protection and privacy teams are under more pressure than ever with new laws, AI oversight, data breaches, and the constant expectation to do more with fewer resources.
That's why TrustArc built a modern privacy and data protection management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. It unifies your tools, automates the work that slows you down, and surfaces what matters most right when you need it.
From guided quick actions to our intelligent assistant, Ask Arc, you get credible, contextual answers backed by expert research, not generic AI guesses.
Finally, privacy that works the way privacy pros work.
Learn how TrustArc helps teams move faster with confidence at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.
This is Serious Privacy by TrustArc. Here are your hosts, Paul Breitbart and Kay Royal.
Even when you have a pretty strict recording schedule, every Thursday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, sometimes something comes up, meaning one of us needs to miss a recording with a guest. And this week I was the one missing out, while Kay got to have an amazing conversation with Kirk Nahra. Their topics range from law school to HIPAA, US state legislation, and some more HIPAA. All ingredients for a very pleasing episode of the podcast. My name is Paul Breitbart.
And I'm Kay Royal, and welcome to Serious Privacy.
For those of you who don't know Kirk Nahra, you're in for a treat, because Kirk has been a leading authority on privacy and cybersecurity matters for more than 2 decades, especially when it comes to US health privacy. He is the winner of the 2021 IAPP Vanguard Award, which each year recognizes one IAPP member who demonstrates exceptional leadership, knowledge, and creativity in privacy and data protection. Kirk also is a member of the National Advisory Board of the U.S. Center for Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection and serves as a fellow for the Cordell Institute for Policy in Medicine and Law at Washington University in St. Louis. So, without further ado, let's hear the conversation.
I will add that for myself, I met you many, many years ago with Lori Nugent. She had invited me to speak on healthcare. For some reason, I'm thinking it was in Colorado. Might not have been. And it was many, many years ago.
I know it was a long time ago. I haven't heard Lori's name in a long time.
Right. She's in Texas now. She moved there, I say a few years ago now. It's been quite a while. I left and she moved there. So let's start with the unexpected question, Kirk, as you are one of the people I would consider my privacy heroes. What's a new place that you've recently been to?
A new place that I've been to during the pandemic. I did go, the one sort of nice vacation I've had during the pandemic, I was able to go with my family, wife and 2 kids, and that's harder these days because my 2 kids are both out of college, and we were able to get a week this summer in the Dominican Republic, which I had been to. We'd been to one other time before, but that's probably 10 or 12 years ago, and definitely a weird experience being there in the pandemic. And the funny thing about that was actually, we were there last summer, so it was pre-booster,
pre-Omicron.
Definitely pre-Omicron, post 2 vaccines, pre-boosters, but then you had to test to get back in the country, right? You had to do a test in the DR before you could get on a plane. And that was terrifying, like waiting for the results because, what are you going to do if you don't, we're staying, we have this rental apartment, which is very nice, but on Saturday or whenever it was, we're out of there. And so, we don't test, if somebody tests positive, I'm like, what are we going to do? So that was a little,
oh my goodness,
nerve-wracking. Did not turn out to be a problem, which was good, but that was nice to get away. It was nice. I mean, my son lives in D.C. He's actually in the healthcare field. He's a government affairs lobbyist at this point in the healthcare space. So he's at least around. We see him pretty regularly. My daughter lives in New York, and so that's a much harder. It's not that we never see her, but that's a much harder space. So it was really nice to have the 4 of us together.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm with you. My children are 29 and 30 right now, both girls. The 30-year-old has my grandchildren. So the other one's in finishing up her 2nd year of med school, but here in Arizona. She's in Tucson. Cool. So I'm with you when it's like, it's kind of harder to get to both of them, right?
Well, we're trying to do something this summer because both of my kids are actually going to be starting law school in the fall, which is not really unexpected isn't quite the right word, but they've each come to it from different directions and different goals and different reasons for going. So it's going to be
that's kind of cool. My kids were 8 and 10 when I started law school. And so they went through law school with me. And then I worked at the law school for 4 years afterwards, running pro bono and student life. So they spent 7 years of their very young life at law school. And they both told me in no uncertain terms, they will never, ever go to law school. Yet they thought about it.
Well, it's funny. My daughter was very much that way. My son is my son is a prototype law student. I mean, he's, government major and all that, just all the things that sort of, I mean, there isn't one path to law school, but he's the perfect path for it. He doesn't really want to go. He's going for, it's going to help his career. He can do things. He's in a career where you can be a non-lawyer, but you have more opportunities if you're a lawyer.
Right.
My daughter, for the first 18 years of her life, didn't want to be in the room with us if we were talking about law school. She wanted just nothing to do with it. And she's now applying, and she's gotten in already. She's, so she's going to be going next fall for a JD PhD.
Oh, wow. And I just finished my PhD.
Did you really?
I understand that.
Well, she's doing it as a partially combined program. She works in New York at the Brennan Center for Justice and works on prison reform issues. And she's going to continue doing that. That was a lot of her undergrad work. And so she's really
that's fascinating.
So so they won't, she won't overlap with me all that much. We actually do some pro bono work for her entity. My son is funny because he's in the healthcare field, and for a number of years he would call me and say, "Oh, I met so and so that or whatever." Now I'm meeting people and they're saying, "Oh, are you Joe Nahra? Are you related to Joe Nahra?" And so I do enjoy that a lot, getting that.
Nice, very nice. Well, I was a registered nurse before I went to law school. And so and I was the first in my family to get a bachelor's degree. So it was interesting to me and incredibly proud to watch my daughter go to med school. And of course, as she's in med school, she's just finishing her second year. So she's at the very early stages, but now she's running into legal issues and of course, privacy issues.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting hearing her questions now about the different things.
Oh, yeah.
And everything. Anyway, fascinating. All right. So I know our fans love hearing about these things. And if you don't, y'all can always let me know, but in a very, very polite way. Let's get to talking about healthcare law, since we already went down that route, talking about your son in policy work and my daughter in med school. So I say this past year, but I can't count time over COVID. The past few years, one of the biggest topics in healthcare law that I've been looking at, I'm ignoring COVID-19 right now, is information blocking, and how that topic has kind of snuck up on people. And I've given a couple of webinars on it, on the information blocking. Is that something that you've had to look at or talk to your clients about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting, there's two elements of the issue. There's sort of why it's an issue, and then there's how do you comply with it. And
right.
The why it's an issue is, interesting. I mean, it's at sort of a tension point between a couple of different issues that are going on in dealing with healthcare privacy. It's, the HIPAA rules, which are the primary federal privacy rules, are mainly permissive. They're very permissive in lots of situations. They aren't mandatory very often.
Right. Which most people, for some reason, think HIPAA is a hardcore slam down, can't share data. And it's like, really?
Well, I am unwilling to take a stand on what most people think about HIPAA, because whatever it is, it tends to be wrong. But
Agreed.
Again, HIPAA is let's start there for a second. HIPAA is designed to, from my perspective, I don't know that you can read this anywhere in the HIPAA is designed to do two things at the same time. It is designed to provide really good privacy and security protection, balanced with having a healthcare system that still works well. And so there are...
Yes, you need to provide medical treatment.
Right. There are lots of choices that were made in writing the HIPAA rules that were conscious choices that said we could do more to protect privacy we've already done a lot. We could do more, but if we did that more, there would be some negative implication for the healthcare system. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to make a choice. And so that's been true throughout, from the beginning of the drafting of the rules throughout the whole process. And there's some real-time questions that are going on about that right now that are different from information blocking. Information blocking relates to something that's been in the HIPAA rules from the beginning, which is patient access, patients' access to their own medical records. And a growing effort from a lot of different audiences to make that easier and better and more effective and just more straightforward. And there's been concern that various participants in the healthcare system, largely on the healthcare provider and service provider side, have not been very good at making those records available. There's been a lot of enforcement on HIPAA access rights. But at the same time, there was a tension point because you had this goal of patient access and you had the result that when patients got access to most of the records, particularly in electronic means, through mobile apps and other electronic repositories, that the patient would set up for their own purposes. Because of the limits of how HIPAA works, that meant that those records would go from the protections of HIPAA within the hospital, go to the patient, but no longer be protected by HIPAA. Right. And so there was a choice there. There was a question of, are we going to favor this goal of patient access and push records to patients, but we're going to do that in a way that recognizes that when that happens, the privacy protections, it doesn't mean they disappear, but HIPAA is not the relevant issue anymore.
They're not HIPAA guaranteed, exactly.
And so that's a challenge, and that's an issue, and that's really where the choice was made. That was the policy choice. There were certainly participants in the healthcare system. One of the big electronic health records companies was very out in front about this, basically saying this is a bad idea because it's going to be bad for security of medical information. I mean, it was not a unself-interested position, but it was, right. It's a legitimate position. It's just not the position that the relevant regulators ended up picking. They wanted to favor the access rights. And so information blocking is designed to make that happen more seamlessly. It's designed to make sure that companies don't put up sort of artificial roadblocks. It's going to be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen the first meaningful time that hospital X is going to disclose information exactly like they're supposed to patient record Y, and something's going to go wrong with patient record Y, and patient's going to sue everybody, or they're going to file a complaint, or there's going to be a state AG investigation or something else. Now, again, I don't know, that's my job. My job is to help the hospital defend that investigation, and I can do that. And I think that, but they're going to have to face it, and they're going to have to deal with it, and they're going to say, well, the law forced us to do this. We don't know that it's a good idea. We didn't say it was a good idea. We were just told we had to do it, and this is the consequences. You can't punish us for the consequences. The whole point of these rules is not to punish us for the consequences. You can punish us if we don't do what we're supposed to do, but we did exactly what we're supposed to do. So we're going to see those cases, and I think that's going to play out, and I don't know how it's going to work. I mean, again, I think, I can remember back in the very early days of the HIPAA rules reading, there was a New York Times article. This is like in 2001 or something. And there was an interview with someone at the time who was a leading privacy advocate who was complaining that the hospital wasn't giving her access to her grandmother's medical records. And my reaction was, the hospital shouldn't be giving you access to your grandmother's medical records just because you want, and it was just a perfect example of people just don't understand how these things, even somebody who was right in the middle of the discussion didn't really understand how that was supposed to work. And that's becoming more complicated today.
It is.
Than it was, 20 years ago, because there's more and more health information that isn't actually regulated by HIPAA, which makes all of this area more confusing. I mean, you mentioned COVID earlier. COVID has exacerbated that because the massive volume of healthcare data generated by COVID, most of it and most of the contexts where we care about it are not HIPAA contexts. Every time I
think you and I both have put out an article on LinkedIn or talked on LinkedIn, probably beating our heads in the wall going, people, employer can have this information. It's not a HIPAA violation.
Yeah. Well, and one of the complicated things of being a lawyer, like, for example, when COVID first got started, I had to learn the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is longstanding law, but it's not, nobody thinks of it as a privacy law, but all of a sudden that became a privacy law in certain contexts. And I have to give, legal advice that brings in a lot of different legal principles and a lot of different laws. I mean,
and OSHA.
All kinds of, it's funny. I mean, my dirty little secret, this isn't the first time I've said this, but it's still a dirty little secret of being a lawyer in this area, was basically my advice most of the time is don't do stupid things.
Right.
Highly sophisticated legal advice that took me 3 years of law school to learn. It's don't do stupid things. And it's mainly don't do stupid things because, the law isn't very clear. There aren't specific things that you're not allowed to do, but you can't do things that are going to cause problems. You should be careful about that. And so you want to be smart and reasonable and thoughtful. I mean, that's always good legal advice. I mean, it's not, sometimes there are more particulars to that. And, the information blocking may be a good example, just to go full circle on that. I mean, there are times where a hospital may say, I know this patient wants me to do something that's not good. It's not good for the patient. The patient's going to send that data. That business is not reliable, whatever it is. But, the privacy rules and the information blocking rules are designed to say you can't be paternalistic and refuse to give the records. And that's just the choice that we've made. So,
well, and the guidance that came out, I believe, from the Office of Management and Budget. No. Are they the one that? Anyway, I don't remember exactly who issued the guidance on it, but the guidance that says that even if patients are asking you to send the information to an app that is not secure and private, you cannot tell them that they can't send it to that app for privacy and security reasons. What you can do is tell them in general, for all apps, it might not be a wise decision to send something to an unsecure app, but you cannot advise them against a particular app. Again, you can't be their daddy. No paternalism allowed.
And that's been that's been a theme of, I don't want to say it's been a front and center theme necessarily, but it's been a consistent theme at a bunch of places in the HIPAA rules, which, things like access to lab results. A doctor will say, patient, if a patient doesn't know all the details and we can't explain it to them, it's terrible for the patient. I'm like, just give them the records. I mean, if they want to
give them the records,
if they want to call you, if they want to call you and talk about it, they should call you and talk about it. And I think that's, again, it's a funny system. I remember when the rules were being written, I think that the HHS had this vision that, you would go to the doctor and the doctor would hand you the privacy notice and you would have a lovely 20-minute conversation about, ethical issues on data, and that
doesn't
never
work that way
happened once. It doesn't happen a single time ever. And that's just not how it works. And, it's okay. I mean, people, I think people, in lots of privacy settings, the only reasonable protection people have is reading a privacy notice, and they never read a privacy notice.
And they don't. Except for the one guy who redlined my HIPAA privacy notice from Concentra. And I'm like, this is really interesting that and literally with a red pen.
Yeah, it's not a one.
That you redlined it, but.
Yeah, but I think the important, one of the important things about HIPAA is that if you never read your privacy notice, you still have lots of protections. And that's different from most laws. And it's one of the things that, again, it was one of those choices that the government made to make the healthcare system work back. It's like, we're going to protect your privacy because we're going to limit what people can do with your data, but we're not going to we're not going to give you the ability to pick and choose some of these things. The normal stuff that goes on in the healthcare system, we're going to allow to happen because that makes the healthcare system work better. And that's not just a benefit for the hospitals, that's benefit for the patients too. So that was a judgment call.
And we all know that patients aren't going to research, or people, we don't have to say patients. We know people aren't going to research the apps that they use to store sensitive information on. They just don't.
Yeah, I mean,
and they may very well be asking systems to send electronic information to unsecure apps. But you know what? It's that person's choice to be stupid about their data if they choose to be.
So I think that's, that's one of the many, tangents. Tangents isn't quite the right word, but I mean, one of the.
I mean, they probably go post it on Facebook anyway.
Yeah. If I wanted to know about your medical history, I'd much rather have your medical records than have your face.
Right. But I mean, that is something that I do find funny is that the way, and you're probably a lot more academic and scholarly about it than I am, but the way that I explain that to people is, look, if you shared your information with your grandmother told her poker club, HIPAA doesn't apply. It's the same thing with sharing with other things.
Well, there is an article that I use when I teach. I teach a full semester class on healthcare privacy. In fact, I'm in the middle of teaching that right now. I taught class yesterday afternoon, and there's an article that I use at the end of the semester when I have a class that's sort of evaluating HIPAA, and I use an article written by a doctor who just writes a lot in this area. Who's very interested in privacy, who basically says that healthcare privacy is dead.
Right.
And the reason, what he relies on for that is that there's been a whole bunch of security breaches. And I think it's kind of a silly, maybe too strong, but it's not, it's bordering on that. I mean, it's like, yes, there's been lots of security breaches. There continue to be lots of security breaches. But if I want to, do I know what your medical history is? No. Is it possible that I could figure it out if I spent a lot, But the average person doesn't know anything about another average person. You don't even know anything. You know very limited things about the people that sit in your office, the people that are next door to you, the people that are your neighbors. And again, it's not at all that healthcare privacy is dead. And I think that there's been general statements about that kind of idea forever. I don't, and it's not just a question of putting a genie back in the bottle. You can certainly say that today's law is not good enough. I mean, I think that's an increasingly common opinion, and I'm sympathetic to that. But to say that there aren't any laws and that there aren't any rules and that there aren't any protections just isn't true. There may not be enough, but again, most of your data is not generally available to most people for most reasons.
And thank you. And make sure you send me that art. I can post it in the description for the podcast as well. And because I also teach a class now, mine's on privacy, big data, and emerging technology. So we cover lots of different topics, but I usually cover the healthcare data one. But in that, I think you're right. You just said something that tweaked me a little bit when you said that saying that we don't have laws is inaccurate. And that is something I work on a global level with privacy. And that is something that I hear quite often, especially Europeans say that the United States doesn't have good privacy law. Yes, we do. It just happens to be for healthcare or for finance, education.
Well, it's just different. I mean, I've been using again in the healthcare context. I've been using two examples of sort of how you can think about these issues. And one of the options is the CCPA or the general California model. So if you are a California resident, at this minute in time, your healthcare data is subject to at least 6 different sets of rules.
At least.
I mean, there's HIPAA, which is carved out from CCPA. There's a California medical privacy law, which is carved out from CCPA. There's medical research, which is also carved out from CCPA and covered by the common rule and other things. Then you have CCPA itself, which clearly covers something, but it doesn't cover any of the data that your employer has, and it doesn't cover any of the data held by nonprofits. And so that's kind of a crazy system. I mean, your data is probably protected somewhere, but consumers can't figure that out, and it makes very little sense if you're any kind of business that doesn't just operate in that one segment. Compare that to Europe. So what Europe has is one law that covers everything.
One law to rule them all.
Right, but what you don't have in Europe is any of the nuance that you have under HIPAA. Yeah. I mean, again, all the choices that they made in HIPAA to protect privacy while still allowing the healthcare system to work well, none of that is in play in Europe. Yeah. And so you could certainly say that European law is broader and there are fewer gaps, but that doesn't make it better. I mean, I do, one of the things I've been saying, for a couple of years now is that, I mean, I am increasingly of the view in the U.S. that the state of U.S. privacy law is currently bad for consumers and bad for businesses. The only people it's good for is me. Because I'm a privacy lawyer, and my job is to help people make sense of all this stuff. And, in a perfect world, you wouldn't need me to do as much of that, right? You wouldn't need me to make sense of all this because people could understand it. Now, it doesn't, passing GDPR in the United States wouldn't eliminate the need for privacy lawyers. There's lots of people who are being privacy lawyers on GDPR. It's just that what I find myself and my clients having to spend so much time on these days is just they don't have any idea what to do because there's too many things that are overlapping, and they partially overlap and they're inconsistent. And what do I do with this and what do I do with that when it's the same thing but different people? You know, and those kinds of choices I think are just bizarre at this point. They don't help consumers if people don't know what they're supposed to do.
Right.
I don't think that increases privacy protection. So we, as you said, we have lots of privacy laws. We don't have one. There are places where there are places where your protection in the United States is better than it is in Europe.
Right.
And there are places where it's worse.
Right. Agreed.
Because it's not consistent.
Now, I will say one of the tenets that I've believed in, and I still believe in, and people are welcome to try to convince me otherwise. But if a U.S. company does not have a physical presence in the EU, then I recommend that their data protection officer, if they're required to have one, should be well versed in U.S. law. Now, I normally say should be located in North America, but it's not that. They should be well versed in U.S. privacy law because U.S. privacy law is very complex to wrap your head around. And if you're not well versed in U.S. privacy law, then you're likely to put in policies for your company that your company can't abide by and be compliant with U.S. privacy law. Because a lot of the policies that come out of other countries following the other countries' laws are very, very conservative and don't necessarily commercially work with U.S. privacy law. And can be very, very convoluted. And you certainly don't want to put in 5 different policies for your company that says, in here do this, in here do that. You want something consistent because consistency breeds compliance.
Well, I mostly agree with that. I think that is I think that's that would be, you know, if I was in charge of the world, which, you know, isn't happening anytime soon.
I'll vote for that.
One of the things that I say, and it sounds sort of facetious, but it's partially facetious, but sort of not, is give me one law. I don't even care what it says. I think we can, you know, I think that ease of understanding and consistency matters a lot. And it makes, you could certainly take the position, and again, there are, you know, I have academic friends who think that my entire professional existence is horrible because of what I do in general. But it's, you know,
because we're practitioners.
If you have a line, people are going to go to that line. I get it. But I don't think anyone is helped by where you don't understand what the line is.
Exactly.
And where it's too confusing to figure it out. And so I do think that having that kind of consistency, and I think that, you know, companies for the most part, there are clearly differences in different places and differences in the United States in different sectors and things like that.
Yeah.
With that said, maybe this goes back to what I said earlier in the COVID context. Most of privacy law is not doing stupid things. One of my favorite law review articles, could be my favorite. I don't have a list of favorite law review articles, but my favorite law review articles was in a wonderful law review called The Green Bag, which is a eclectic, very unusual law review that's edited by Professor Ross Davies from George Mason, who, full disclosure, I've known Ross since we were in 4th grade together. So I've known,
Oh, wow. Okay.
But he published a number of years ago a piece by Dan Solov and Woody Hartzog that was basically called, I don't have the title off the top of my head, but it was like an integrated theory of global privacy compliance. And it's, you've got the law review stuff and it thanks all these people and it, thank you for cooperating on earlier drafts and everything. And it's got that, it's got that title. And then you turn the page and it says, be reasonable. And that's the end of the law review article. That's the entire law review article is be reasonable. And
I've seen that. I'm diligently taking notes here. And then I went, wait a minute, this sounds way too familiar.
It's a great idea. And it's again, it's so true. It's not perfect, but that's a really good start to doing most privacy compliance.
Yeah.
And if you do that, if you do that baseline, again, you want, if you're dealing with, children or you're dealing with some, maybe you got to do more than that. But for the most part, that covers a lot of ground. And again, a lot of my job is, do you really want to do that? That sounds like a terrible idea. Or have you thought about what's going to happen with that?
Right,
and when somebody realizes, oh, I didn't think about that part. No, that's such a funny thing. I mean, I have trouble teaching that to my law students because you didn't learn in law school how to ask like what the implications of what that business judge. That's just not something we do in law school. And I have found. I mean, this has been just amusing to watch over my career. I mean, nothing I've done in my career for 30 plus years had anything to do with anything I did in law school. Essentially, I mean, it's. And just the kinds of the advice I do. I mean, I'm a business counselor. I'm an ethics counselor. I'm a professional management counselor. I'm a PR person. I'm all this stuff that
you wear a lot of hats.
you just learn how to do it over the years, but it's not something you learned in school, or at least I don't think my school was any different than anybody else's school.
Probably not. But you did say something that, and this might be our lead into the close of the podcast, is because we try to aim for about 35 minutes because we got complaints from our fans when we were running 55 minutes that was way too long to walk the dog. So we try to aim for about 35 minutes now, so they only have to walk the dog for half an hour. But one of the things that you said resonated with me about children. And right now I'm writing up the Utah privacy law. As I haven't looked at the news today, but I don't think it's been signed by the governor yet, but getting it ready to go. So those of you that look to TrustArc for the privacy laws, I'm getting Utah added in there. But it's interesting that now Virginia, Colorado, Utah, the CPRA define sensitive information as information from a known child.
Yeah, I mean,
and so that's going way beyond COPPA, frankly. Now, they are sticking to the ages of under 13, which, as you know, could conflict with other countries' laws on children because they may be under 14 or under 16. But still, basically, those under 13 are protected. California, of course, has the 13 to 15.
Well, and you mentioned your kids, and I've never met your kids. I have no idea what your kids. I use the example. I just use the example. I talk about my son, who's a wonderful, wonderful human being. But I say, you know what? The day he turned 13, he was not an adult. It's not. And I mean,
right.
COPPA's a nonsense law in that sense. I mean, the idea. I mean, and basically, it was the only thing they could get done at that point in time. I get it, but it's like no one on the Hill would say, yes, I want my 14-year-old child not to have any protections. They would not.
Right.
No one would think that way. I mean, you could debate 16 or 18 or 21, whatever, but no one's going to say that really is a guideline that makes sense. And that was such an interesting thing. I mean, going back to the COVID reference earlier, I mean, we work for all kinds of entities. A lot of our pro bono work that my group does is for organizations that provide support to kids,
right?
Academic support, career, whatever it is. And every one of them needed to move online 2 years ago. And so we helped tons of organizations figure out how to do that. And one of the things they had to navigate was COPPA. It's like, okay, that's not really what COPPA was intended to deal with. It wasn't, having your schoolwork done online while you're working with your teacher, but we had to figure out how to do that. And
that's the way it's written.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, but I'm with OutSchool now.
Okay.
So I left TrustArc, still love TrustArc. My heart belongs to TrustArc.
I was going to say, you just made a plug a minute ago, and I'm like, I could have sworn she left TrustArc. Why is she making a plug for the...
Still love TrustArc. Heart still with TrustArc. But I'm with OutSchool, so it's considered an ed tech unicorn. Yeah. It's online educational services for kids. And of course, through COVID, I mean, they went through the roof. And so working with them now, and I have to say, I've worked with COPPA for a long time. I'm learning a lot more about children's privacy than I ever thought I needed to know.
No, and look, it's obviously an area that makes a lot of sense to pay attention to. I mean, you can understand why kids are different. Now, again, they're not different in every way, and there are parts of it and parts of the discussion that goes in different. But it's that's one that I think everybody can agree on up to a point. Yeah. Again, the idea of going above 12, I suspect there's a pretty. If you were able to do a secret poll of people on the Hill, I bet all of them would say, yeah, let's protect 13, 14, 15.
I think they're looking at it. Well, I know they're looking at it.
Yeah, no, they absolutely are looking at it.
But the differences between it is amazing. I mean, I have a 3-year-old grandson. I also have a 2-year-old grandson, and a granddaughter's about to be 1. But I have a 3-year-old grandson, and I have an 8-year-old granddaughter. And I do remember my children as teenagers. Yeah. And there is a vast difference among 3 to 8 to 14. Vast difference.
Well, and again, one of the other issues we see, and this is a healthcare issue, is that, not every 13-year-old is the same either. I mean, there are girls and boys differences. There are certainly differences among the kids. There, and I said there are people that are 22 that are not, they're still children. Versus,
True.
My daughter at age 9 was more mature than almost any 18-year-old I know, and so it's not. You don't want to say, oh, she's particularly smart and sophisticated about this stuff. She doesn't get any protection of COPPA, but again, they're not all the same when you use a figure like that.
They're not. And it's interesting that we come to that because, of course, there is nothing in any law whatsoever that I've ever read that said part of the risk assessment you make is based on that individual's individuality. Oh, no.
Well, I've been using that with my healthcare lectures recently, talking about even health information. It's like, okay, HIPAA, for example, treats all your health information the same. So your name and your address and your physical and your mental health status and your HIV status are all the same. That's a choice. I mean, again, it's kind of an odd choice. And then I say, it was your foot surgery. Who cares about your foot surgery records? But then it's like, okay, the example is right. My foot surgery because I, twisted an ankle playing tennis, who cares? But if it's LeBron James who broke an ankle and is trying to get a new contract next year and isn't going to be able to get it because he broke his ankle, all of a sudden it matters a lot to that person. Yeah. And we don't really have any good way to do that. And that goes back to the policy choices. If we gave every person the ability to pick and choose how their records were going to be protected, the system would collapse. And that wouldn't be good for patients. And so they made a different choice. But it's not, there's lots of ways you can go on these things.
Yeah, it is. And you reminded me back, and I was at Concentra when we met before, Urgent Care Center. And it's been publicly said, so I'm not sharing any details here. Concentra at times does the physicals for major sporting leagues. And you can imagine the people that want to get their hands on that data.
Yeah, absolutely. When I get my physical, none of the tennis players care about that. Yeah.
She's almost 54 years old. We don't care. Exactly. Well, Kirk, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Was there anything that when I asked you to come on the show, you wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to say, to share with the listeners? Anything in particular, words of wisdom that we carry with us to our future days?
Oh, words of wisdom, boy. I'm working on an article for one of the online publishers about mentoring in law, mentoring. And, I'll tell your listeners, I mean, I try to offer this to people all over the place. I talk to lots of law students, most of whom are not my law students. I talk to, you've seen in some of the IAPP stuff. Yeah. So if people have any questions, if people want to reach out and ask about stuff, I'm happy to give you, again, I'm not going to put a day aside, but I'm happy to have a phone call. I'm happy to have a video to talk about these issues. I think, again, there's tremendous opportunities in the field that I ended up, somewhat coincidentally ending up in, and people
accidentally fell into and loved it.
Yeah, and people are choosing it now because it's a real, you can really think about it, but it's hard and it's complicated and it's much. I was able to learn because I got in this at the beginning. I was able to learn sort of each new issue one at a time.
Yeah.
I have a lot of sympathy for my young colleagues on my team who have to learn 50 things at once. That's really hard to do. And so
I hadn't thought of it that way before, but you're right, Kirk. I mean, I learned HIPAA.
Right. You learn HIPAA and I learned Gramm-Leach-Bliley, and then you learn the security rule. And then I can do it one at a time because I've been doing it for 20 plus years at this point. But I said, my new folks, I have one of my young colleagues who's, helps me out on a million things. I mean, God, the number of things he's had to learn in 2 years working for us is astonishing. And it is astonishing is a good word. But I will reiterate that to our listeners as well. Y'all heard me say, I'm not just saying it because I'm speaking with Kirk, but he is absolutely phenomenal. And when he says, feel free to reach out, he's happy to have a quick conversation with you. And he does mean quick. He does not mean all day long. Feel free to reach out to Kirk. It doesn't have to be 30 seconds either. I mean, I have lots of half-hour slots, so it's not.
I think that's one of the comments you made in one of the articles I wrote on LinkedIn years ago about why I hate quick questions. They're never quick questions. Anyway, feel free. Kirk, thank you so very, very much. I've jotted down notes on a lot of the things you've mentioned. I'll make sure that they're in the show description. That way our listeners can find them easily. And I thank you. Oh, hold on. Paul's going to make me give the ending, which I don't have pulled up. But if you like our show, please like it, please share it, please rate it. Feel free to do so. You can find it on your favorite podcast app, or you can go to Serious Privacy on Buzzsprout and listen to it from there. You can find me on Twitter at Heart of Privacy. You can find Paul at EuroPaulB. You can find TrustArt. You can find Serious Privacy at Podcast Privacy on Twitter or on LinkedIn under Serious Privacy. Until next time, thank y'all. Bye, y'all.
That was Serious Privacy.
If you're a data protection or privacy professional, you already know the pressure. Non-stop regulatory change, AI oversight, internal demands, and the expectation to somehow stay ahead of it all. And the old patchwork of tools just isn't cutting it anymore.
No, that's why TrustArt created a modern privacy management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. The TrustArt platform brings your workflows, evidence, research, tasks, and applications all together in one unified and intelligent workspace so you don't waste time digging, clicking, or context switching.
With Ask Arc, your privacy assistant, you can ask plain language questions about laws, jurisdictions, or even your own program data and get credible, cited answers based on NIMD research and more than 1,000 global laws. It's explainable, transparent, and purpose-built for data protection and privacy.
So if you need to add a vendor, create a cookie banner, or start an assessment, quick actions take formally complex tasks, turn them into bite-sized guided workflows to save you time.
It's a platform that thinks like you, works like you, and helps you move faster with confidence, whether you're a seasoned DPO or you're just getting started.
See how modern privacy gets done. Explore Arc at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.